The following program is produced by Londonderry residents. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of the LACTV staff or its volunteers, and should not be considered an endorsement by CTV20 or its staff and volunteers.
Good morning. Welcome to another version of Concord Conversations. This morning we have with us Town Manager Mike Malaguti, State Representative Doug Thomas, Town Councilor and State Representative and member of the Water Commission, and myself, I'm State Representative Sherm and Doug. So what we want to do this morning is try and explain to the people of Londonderry, the citizens of Londonderry, some of the water issues that we have and some of the solutions that we've come up with. So with that, I guess we'll start with you, Ron.
Absolutely.
Oh, I forgot. This is Ron Dunn. I forgot. Thank you. But this is Ron Dunn, and we'll start with Ron.
Good morning. I wanted to start by explaining the warrant article. First off, it's warrant article 3 on the warrant. The way the warrant article is written, it's a little confusing, so I want to try to break it down. We are asking for $13 million that come from outside sources. We're asking $8 million to come from a grant. $2 million is going to come from ARPA funds, and $2 to $3 million is going to come from the town portion of the warrant article, which we're asking for on warrant article 3. The total amount that they're asking for on the very bottom of the article is $215,000 to pay the loan. The way the warrant article is written, it has to be written this way legally. We have to appropriate the entire amount of the project, which is $25,750,000. That total amount has to be appropriated in our budget because it kind of funnels through the town. So that amount of money has to be appropriated. So it's a little confusing. But the only amount that we're asking for the taxpayers is $215,000. What is basically happening is we're going to get $23 million from grants and other sources. The town is going to put up $2 to $3 million. We're basically going to only pay for 11.3% of the project. So it's a very important project. It's the start of, I'd say, phase 1 of a project to run down High Range Road to 102, and it's the building block to start from. And I'd like to add anything, Mike?
No, I think you've summed it up exactly right.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's important to maybe take one step back and put it in larger context, which is, and I should say, Speaker and Representative Thomas, thank you for having me. First things first.
Yeah.
But we have a water quality, water supply problem in southern New Hampshire. We've had that for a while. And this dates really all the way back to 2016 when it became clear that the St. Gobain plant in Merrimack was emitting PFAS into the atmosphere. There was a series of steps that took place between 2016 and now, a lot of studying, a lot of testing, a lot of sampling, and then ultimately the consent decree that everybody knows about. The consent decree obligates St. Gobain to remediate at its cost and expense about contamination in about the western third part of Londonderry. There's about 1,000 wells in town that are over the current standard, and roughly half of those are within the consent decree. When we talk about water supply and water quality, we're not just talking about PFAS. We also have an arsenic problem in southern New Hampshire, and it hasn't been the case the last couple of summers, but I can remember not too long ago when it just didn't rain all summer and people's wells were going dry and needed to have their wells fracked. And so PFAS is a big part of the problem, but it's not the only problem. And so you're exactly right, Ron. We sort of have been working for a while, talking to key stakeholders at the state level, talking with Penachuk, who has the franchise, and talking with St. Gobain. St. Gobain is evaluating water line extensions in this area within the consent decree. And what we're trying to do is to position ourselves to leverage the work that they're looking to do and to sort of build on top of it. There's a lot of money available at the state level right now. That isn't going to be the case for long. And so there really is a closing window of opportunity here. And we want to make sure that we take advantage of all those dollars that are not Londonderry dollars.
I have to say, I remember back in 2016 when this first came to my committee, because we deal with air pollution in my committee, and we heard rumblings of the fact that St. Gobain was within standards of the air filtration standards at the time, and so no one ever thought much of it. They thought at the time it was no big deal, but then they started to discover through testing that the particles were settling down into the ground, and it became a water issue, and that's when we became very aware of that situation. And through a series of bills, the standards in the state have been I should say increased. The amount per trillion decreased, so that where we're at now, we have discovered that we need to solve this very important water issue. In my opinion, as far as local concern here in this town, water is the #1 issue we have in this town to get under control. And I think this warrant article is extremely important. It is the most important warrant article, I believe, to serve the town people here, that we need to have people understand exactly why it's written the way it is and exactly how much money that they're on the hook for versus what we can get through other sources.
That's exactly right, and I think that just to get really basic about it, as you suggested, this is what's called an emerging contaminant, and the thing with emerging contaminants is we don't necessarily know what the next one is, and we don't necessarily know what it does to the human body fully, because we just don't have decades and decades of data. But one of the things about PFAS that is so concerning is it seems to have an effect on the kidneys. It seems to have an effect on the liver. And we want to make sure that we give people that clean, plentiful drinking water that really is a basic human right. As you pointed out, we're cobbling together different sources of money to try to minimize the impact on the Londonderry taxpayer.
If I'm correct, I think one of the big problems that we've developed with this particular instance is that, unlike incidences in the past where a plant has contaminated a water system, if I'm correct, isn't the problem that the PFAS coming out of St. Gobain is airborne?
Correct.
And it's contaminating everything, the soil, the water, and everything else.
Correct.
And that's why it's such a more horrific problem than, let's say, even like the Love Canal or something like that, where a certain underground water system was contaminated.
That's exactly right. I mean, it really is a problem, and it affects Londonderry, I think, most severely at this point in time. But you're right about the kind of the mechanism of how does it get into the water. It's airborne. It drifts over in the wind, and Londonderry just happens to be the east of the plant, and then over time, trickles down into the groundwater. But it is a large area that we're talking about. It is certainly not a localized contamination issue. But it should also be pointed out that PFAS is in lots of other things. And in New Hampshire, we rely on septic systems. People pour, household cleaning products down the drain. People pour, shampoo and things that might have had PFAS in it in the past down the drain. And so, there's other ways that it can get out into the environment as well, which is why it's so important to make sure that we focus on getting clean drinking water to everyone.
And another benefit of this high-range extension is any future contaminants. Like we just found out about PFAS in 2016, as Doug was just saying. 10 years from now, might be a new contaminant we don't even know about at this point, that this public water system would help us solve, so that we wouldn't have future contamination and have our residents have a new contaminant that we didn't know about contaminate their well again. And this is, once again, one thing I didn't mention, it's a 20-year loan. The interest rate is 1% during construction and 3.5% after. So the rates are excellent.
Now's the time to do it, and that's right. So $215,000 approximately for the first year's debt service. That's the tax impact of this in year one. As you pointed out, it really is a favorable loan program. It's the PFAS remediation loan program. It's one of the programs that was stood up by the state, by DES, to try to, funded by the legislature, to try to make it a little bit easier to take care of some of these large projects at the local level.
Ron, you, at the beginning you mentioned phase one.
Yep.
Can you describe to our folks here exactly what phase one would encompass?
Sure.
Under this warrant article?
Absolutely. We hope to have this be a 20-year project is our goal. Phase one would come down High Range Road to 102, and it would make the pipe 16 inches. It would give us enough capacity so that we could branch out from High Range to both sides of High Range, and then future phases would expand it out to the south, the west, east, so that everybody in Londonderry would have public water, so that PFAS, arsenic, any other future contaminants that we don't even know about now could be remediated, and we wouldn't have this issue again in Londonderry with our residents.
That's right, and I think it's important to just amplify the point I think that you made, which is this is the foundation. This is kind of the cornerstone, and it is a water main, but residences on High Range Road would be able to hook up. There is a couple different things I want to point out. There is a rebate program available at the state level right now that offers up to $10,000 for folks who have a PFAS exceedance in their well to connect to a public water system. So that's really important. But then, the High Range Road, as you know, forms the boundary, the outer boundary of the consent decree area. And so everything to the west is taken care of by St. Gobain. Everything to the east is not. And so, we're looking to expand this system out to the east, out into those neighborhoods that really in this area are some of the most heavily contaminated neighborhoods in town that are not within the consent decree. And I think the last thing I'll say is on this point is we're not here to twist anyone's arms. I think all of us trust the voters, but we want to make sure that the voters have full information about this to be able to make an informed decision. It's not the most straightforward wording in terms of warrant articles. It's written the way it is because of certain legalities and requirements in terms of how you have to put these things together. So we're just here to bring some clarity to that and make sure people understand exactly what we're looking to do.
And if I could just pull off what Mike just said, that's one of the questions I get a lot is how did this go from 2 million to 2.9 million? And that was basically just in case the project is $2 million and $1, we would not be able to do it in that case.
That's right.
So based on advice from people that are in the legal department, we needed to go with the bigger number. However, if we don't use it, we don't have to use it. We don't use the money. It stays there. We don't need it. But we have to be able to have the money available if we do need it.
That's right.
So approximately how many residents under phase one would be hooked up to the public water supply?
Well, it's a great question, Doug. And unfortunately, the answer is we don't know right now. And the reason we don't know is because the regulatory environment is changing. The current, so the standard that we started out with was 70 parts per trillion for PFAS.
Right.
And that was in 2020, it came down to 12. There was some court action and back and forth, but ultimately it settled at 12. The EPA has announced that the standard is coming down to 4. There's a set of rulemaking procedures that needs to take place. It's going to take some time. But certainly, if the standard is 4 parts per trillion, it's going to bring in a lot more people who have a PFAS exceedance in their wells. So that's the best answer I have for you right now. We're not talking about even under the current standard being able to hook up hundreds of people necessarily, but we pretty close to it, and we're looking to hook up everyone that we possibly can. Of course, you don't need to have a PFAS exceedance to hook up to the water. But it certainly is an additional incentive to do so.
I would like to say one thing, because you just brought that up, and because there's a bill coming through my committee, will people, I don't know why they would want to, but would people be required to hook up if this project comes down, in front of their other house, say within 100 feet? Would they be required to hook up?
That's a great question. Absolutely not. To my understanding, that legal authority doesn't exist to require people to be able to do that, and we wouldn't want to do that anyway.
The other benefit, Doug, is that they could hook up and still use their well for their garden or for their lawn. So there's people that have asked me that question too. They certainly can have access to their well and hook up. So they have clean drinking water in their house for their shower, for their drinking water, and then they could also keep their well to water their yard with.
Could you, either one of you, or talk about, if I'm correct, we have two available water suppliers, both Manchester and Pennachuck. Can you expand on that a little bit, as to who covers what and
Sure.
how that would work?
Sure, it's a great question. So most of the town is serviced by the Pennachuck system. They hold the franchise to most of the the central part of town, the southern part of town. We get our water from predominantly from the north, from Manchester Waterworks, and that is through supply agreements that Pennachuck has with them. It comes down from Manchester, from Lake Massabesic, and becomes part of the Pennachuck system. There've been discussions about, does Londonderry want to go into the water business? Would it give us a better ability to control rates? Is that something that we want to do? We've looked at that. I think that we've developed information and data that will make that decision something that people can decide about in the future. But really, this doesn't have anything to do with Londonderry going into the water business at this point in time. We have an existing utility. It's Pennachuck, and this would be part of that Pennachuck system.
Would Pennachuck cover the whole town, or would, like where I am in the northern part of the town, I know the water line they brought down years ago, is the one from Manchester.
That's right.
So would if the people in the northern part that are on like Old Derry Road,
Yep.
Would they be paying Manchester, working with Manchester Waterworks, or would they be working with Pennachuck?
So I believe you're exactly right. That area of town is part of the Manchester franchise, and so yes, it would become part of the Manchester system.
Well, you had a lot of other things on your list here, Ron. So what else you got?
I just had some questions that people asked me. One of the benefits of running this system down High Range Road is that it will allow us to put fire hydrants down High Range, which will allow us also to help our fire protection in the town. And this would also hopefully allow homeowners to have lower rates on their homeowner insurance. So that's one benefit. Any future contaminations that we don't know about, this water system would allow it to take care of. The warrant article number 3 has to pass by 60%. The reason for that is that we're asking for a loan, and it has to pass by 60%. So we're asking people to come out and vote for this because it has to pass. It can't just pass by a majority.
That's right.
And that is everything else we pretty much covered during the
Well,
conversation.
that interesting that you brought up the number warrant article 3, correct?
Yep. Yes.
So perhaps we might see in the near future some signs up that say vote yes on warrant article 3 if we want to have clean water.
We may.
Right.
I'm not sure. If
Yeah, different individuals around town may be able to do that.
Yes.
Understood, yes.
The town can't.
No, I'm just saying that
Yes.
people may want to think about
Correct.
that.
Right. You do start to see the signs like that this time of year.
That's correct, yeah.
But I just, it's something that's very beneficial for the town. It will help us in the future. I also believe it will help increase home values here in town. If somebody wants to buy your house and you have a well that's contaminated and they have to constantly maintain a POET system, I believe having a public water system would increase the rate of your house, the value of your house also.
Yeah, and let's
So
talk
this-
about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Is the POET systems, because there's a lot of people who have installed POET systems, and they may be asking, well, why should I, consider this warrant article? They're not inexpensive to maintain if they're maintained properly. They require maintenance. They require annual maintenance, and you have to feed them with salt. You have to purchase the salt. You have to change the filters. And so it's not it's not as simple as free water with a POET system or water that you have to pay for with a water line.
You mentioned something earlier about people that have wells that were affected by PFAS that were not in that system, they're getting some type of an allowance.
That's right.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah.
So for people who don't understand that maybe they're not in the area that is being covered right now, but they may be elsewhere. They could be even where I live that have a well. Would they be eligible?
That's a really good point, Doug. The answer is that those programs are available. Within the consent decree, that program is through St. Gobain, and they will, if you have a PFAS exceedance, they will, and you've put in a POET system in the past. I can't remember how far back you can go, but
September 2019.
September 2019, you'll get reimbursed from them. If you're outside the consent decree area and you have an exceedance under current standards, yeah, you can get up to $5,000 to have a point of entry treatment system installed. And that should, based on what I've heard, I think that what you've heard, that should take care of most systems. And you can get up to $10,000 to connect to a public water system as well.
Is that through the federal government?
It's actually through DES.
And to add to that, St. Gobain has their own program where if you put in a POET system in the consent decree, they will reimburse you for it through a different program. Right now, I think they have about 20 applicants.
You've used the terminology POET. I assume that means point of entry?
Point of entry treatment system.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, if this warrant article fails, the whole project goes down the drain, am I correct?
Yeah, we've got this thing called no means no in New Hampshire, and it really is out of respect for the taxpayers, the will of the taxpayers. If this fails, we're legally prohibited from doing this project for 1 year's time.
And unfortunately, if we don't do it now, that money is a very good possibility will not be there 1 year from now.
That's what we've been advised. Is this is really a shrinking window of opportunity. There's always going to be some funding available at the state level and potentially at the federal level, but we don't anticipate it'll be what it is now.
Well, I can't imagine anything more important for the town of Londonderry than clean water. And I hope this conversation is clarifying a lot of questions that people may have, because even if you're not directly affected for the time being, clean water is clean water wherever your kids may go. They may be in areas that are being treated, and so it's beneficial to everybody. So in my opinion, I would say this is my #1 priority in town here. We need to get that warrant passed so we can grab this money and start our project.
I would agree with you, Doug, because everybody deserves clean water. I agree with you.
So we have some time left. Can you explain maybe some of the more details on what to expect once this project starts? What would we see first? What will people start experiencing?
So I think as far as construction goes, so my interpretation is it's going to basically come down High Range Road, so it will interrupt some traffic flow. The pipe will come all the way down to 102. From there, it will expand off. So St. Gobain then will expand off on the west side to hook up the homes. And then the people on High Range Road on the east side would have the opportunity to pick up that grant money that Mike was talking about for $10,000 to hook up to the system also. And would also allow us in the future to expand off of this. Kind of, this is like the main artery, the main line, and then we can expand off from there. Anything else to add?
No, I think that's right. I mean, people should understand a project of this size. There's going to be a period of design, engineering design, geotechnical surveys, and what have you. But I think that it would be within the existing right of way, so that's helpful in terms of keeping it going on track. And then we're talking about miles of pipe, so it's not going to happen overnight.
Londonderry is not the only town that's affected by PFAS. What do you know of what other towns are doing currently to help with their water?
So Merrimack is a town that's affected. They already have a public water system.
I see.
Bedford is affected. They are working on waterline extensions and POETs. Litchfield is affected. They're actually working on waterline extensions and POETs also. So the other towns that are effective they have more of a base than we have right now. Londonderry needs to have this, basically this artery would be like our base where we can draw off of. So it would give us a real good opportunity to expand water to everybody over 20 years.
Well, if I'm correct, isn't it, if we drew like a circle around Merrimack, there's something like $600 million worth of projects that probably need to be done, from what I understand.
That sounds about right. I mean, one of the other things that's sort of happening in the background is there are these 6 community water systems in Londonderry, condominium complexes, what have you, and they're being connected through some of this grant money that's been available. They're being connected to the Pennachuck system. So yeah, there are a lot of projects that are pending right now. A lot of it was driven by the PFAS contamination, but not all of it. So it really is. It's nice to see all of these investments into this important infrastructure that relates so directly to human health and prosperity.
That, you say we're going down to 302, is that where that connector is going to be? That I understand it's going to be, that's separate from this project?
That's a great question, and I think last session there was a bill sponsoring a water crossing to get water from the Pennachuck system across the Merrimack River, and then ultimately into Londonderry and Point South. It is part of that. We've got the supply for this work coming, partially from the north. Ideally, we like to have interconnected systems for engineering purposes, for water quality purposes, and so yeah, that's a big long-term goal, is to get that water from the Merrimack River all the way into Londonderry.
And wasn't that a $10 million project?
Correct.
And that's not part of this. That's
right.
a separate. No. That's a separate amount of money that's
right.
already been authorized.
The total project, I believe, is $200 million in today's dollars.
For Londonderry.
For Londonderry.
Yeah.
So we've studied this, and it was sort of the hey, what would it cost if we ran water everywhere we could run water in Londonderry? And I think it was somewhere north of $200 million. It's a big project. I think it's important to note that this foundation does not necessarily mean that we're going to end up with a $250 million water system. It's something that we're going to have to chip away at over a generation, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the one thing that I know we're running a little bit out of time here. I want to make people understand that this is just the first big slice of the pie, and that we're not going to come back next year and ask for $175 million. That's not going to happen.
Correct.
And so I think people got to realize that that's why this particular project is so important, because it's like the groundwork for expanding
That's
into the
exactly
future.
right.
Without warrant Article 3 this year, we start nothing. We have nothing to go on.
Correct.
And we've got to have that base, like you said, Ron.
Right. This is our foundation. So yes.
Well, this half hour went pretty quickly. Why don't Ron and Mike, closing statements?
Well, I just want to thank you both for having me. I want to thank the legislature and you in particular, Speaker, and Representative Thomas, for your support of Londonderry's efforts in this area over the years. It certainly takes a team, and we're lucky to have representatives who are engaged, including Ron, at the state level. We really are. And so, like I said, I trust the voters. I think that the voters make good decisions, and we just want to make sure that they have the information about this so that they can do that.
I would just close with, once again, thank you guys for doing this program. That it's Article 3 you're voting on, that it's $215,000 to appropriate for the loan payment. Even though the warrant article has all kinds of other numbers in it, it's $215,000 that we're appropriating for. The town is going to get $23 million. It's only going to cost us $2 million to $3 million. So please don't be confused by the warrant article. It's $215,000.
I think Ron and Mike, you sum it up. That's the purpose of our program at Concord Conversations, is to bring forward information around town and the state. So thank you very much for showing. Mr. Speaker, final words.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for watching this, and if you have watched it in the replays, inform your neighbors and your friends and your family in Londonderry that if they watch this, they might get a much clearer definition of what the reality is and not what some wild rumors might be out there. That how important this is for the base of going forward and getting everybody clean water in the town of Londonderry. And that's it for Concord Conversations, and we will see you soon in the future. And thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.
The preceding program was produced by Londonderry residents. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of the LACTV staff or its volunteers and should not be considered an endorsement by CTV 20 or its staff and volunteers.